sometimes, the most ordinary mornings can hide the darkest secrets. I never imagined that a simple request for a breakfast sandwich would change how I saw my own family, or myself. What happened in that kitchen still echoes in my mind, even years later. If you've ever found yourself caught between what's right and what's tempting, between silence and truth, this story is going to hit deep. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because here, we tell real stories, the kind people are too afraid to admit. Now, let me take you back to that morning. The one that started with bacon and coffee, and ended with guilt and silence. I still remember that morning like it's replaying in slow motion. The smell of bacon, the faint hum of the coffee machine, and the sound of rain tapping against the kitchen window. Everything felt so normal, too normal, for what was about to unfold. I was just helping my mom in the kitchen, nothing fancy, just a lazy Sunday morning. She had stepped out to pick up some groceries, leaving me and my stepdad alone in the house. That wasn't unusual, but somehow, that morning felt different. He walked in, still wearing his robe, hair damp from the shower. "You making breakfast?" he asked, his voice calm, almost teasing. I nodded, buttering the bread. "Yeah. Want a sandwich?" He smiled. "A breakfast sandwich sounds perfect." That's when it started. A conversation so casual that no one would have thought twice about it, but there was something in his tone, something in the way he looked at me when he said it. Like he wasn't just asking for food. As I cooked, I could feel the tension building. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. I tried to brush it off, tell myself I was imagining it, but his eyes lingered every time I turned around. When I handed him the plate, his fingers brushed mine, and for a second, I froze. He laughed softly. "You look like you saw a ghost." "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile, trying to sound casual. But inside, my heart was pounding like I'd just run a marathon. He sat at the counter, watching me as he took a bite of the sandwich. "You know," he said after a moment, "you've really changed lately. Grown up, I guess." It wasn't the words, it was how he said them. Slow, deliberate. Like there was a message underneath that I was too afraid to read. I turned away, pretending to wash dishes, pretending not to notice how close he'd gotten when he stood behind me. I could smell his aftershave. Feel his presence just inches away. "Your mom's lucky," he murmured. "You take care of her well." I didn't respond. I couldn't. That morning was the beginning of something I didn't plan, didn't expect, and definitely didn't understand. I told myself it was harmless, just attention, nothing more. But even then, deep down, I knew better. Because after that day, breakfast wasn't just breakfast anymore. The kitchen wasn't just a kitchen. Weeks passed, and what started as glances and quiet moments turned into something heavier, a silence that carried meaning neither of us dared to speak aloud. At first, I thought it would fade. I thought if I ignored it long enough, whatever strange energy existed between us would dissolve on its own. But it didn't. It grew. It lived in the space between words, in the pauses that lasted a second too long. Mom didn't notice, or maybe she didn't want to. She was busy with work, often leaving early and coming home late. That meant more mornings, more evenings, more unplanned moments when it was just him and me under the same roof. He started finding reasons to talk to me, small things at first. Asking for help fixing the coffee maker, reaching out about a recipe, or pretending he'd lost something in the kitchen drawer just to linger a bit longer. And I let him. It's strange how you can see something unfolding right in front of you, and yet not stop it. Maybe it's denial. Maybe it's curiosity. But the truth? It felt good to be noticed. To be listened to. One night, I was sitting in the living room, pretending to watch TV. He came in quietly, leaned against the doorway, and said, "You've been distant lately. Everything okay?" His concern sounded genuine, and maybe that's what made it dangerous. I nodded, keeping my eyes on the screen. "Yeah. Just tired." He walked closer, his tone softening. You know, if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here. That offer lingered in the air. It wasn't the words that scared me, it was the comfort I felt hearing them. I shouldn't have. But I did. The next few days, I found myself thinking about that moment more than I should have. About what it meant. About why I didn't push back. Then came the moment that shifted everything again. It was another quiet morning. Mom had gone out early. He was in the kitchen, making coffee. I walked in, and he looked up, smiling faintly like he'd been waiting for me. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He gestured toward the pan. "I made breakfast. Thought I'd return the favor this time." The gesture was simple, but it meant something. Too much, maybe. We ate together in silence, both pretending everything was normal. But the silence wasn't empty, it was thick, filled with everything we didn't say. When I stood to leave, he stopped me with just a look. No words, no movement. Just a look that said everything he couldn't say out loud. That's when I realized, this wasn't about affection anymore. It was about control. About curiosity. About seeing how far the silence could stretch before it broke. I left the kitchen without saying a word. My heart raced, my thoughts tangled. Because deep down, I knew, something had already broken. We just hadn't admitted it yet. It became the silent witness to a secret that would haunt me long after. And that's when I realized, sometimes, the smallest moments, the ones that seem so ordinary, can lead to the kind of choices that change everything. The next few days after that morning felt strange. Nothing was said, nothing was done, but something had changed. It was like there was an invisible line between us now, one that neither of us dared to cross, yet somehow, we both kept walking closer to it. My stepdad acted normal. He'd make small talk at breakfast, ask about work, and crack a few jokes about my bad coffee. But beneath those smiles, I sensed something heavier, a kind of quiet awareness we were both trying to ignore. It was in the way he lingered a little longer when saying goodbye before heading out for work. The way he'd casually ask if I'd eaten yet, as if concern could mask something else entirely. One evening, after dinner, Mom had gone upstairs early. It was just the two of us again. I was drying the dishes, and he was leaning on the counter, nursing a cup of tea. "You know," he began, his voice low, "you've been really helping your mom out lately. She doesn't say it enough, but she appreciates you." I nodded. "I try to." He looked down at his cup for a moment, then said quietly, "You remind me of her sometimes." The words hung there, uncomfortably honest. I wasn't sure what to say, so I busied myself wiping the same plate over and over. He smiled faintly. "You don't have to be nervous. I'm just saying you've got her heart, that same kindness." Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. It wasn't wrong, but it wasn't right either. There was warmth in his tone, the kind that made me feel seen but also guilty for feeling noticed. The next morning, I found a note on the counter. Just a simple message. "Thanks for the sandwich the other day. You make the mornings better." No name. No signature. But I didn't need one. I stared at it longer than I should have, trying to decide if it was just a thank you or something more. From that day, every time we were in the same room, it felt like words carried double meanings. Even silence had weight. I'd catch him glancing over, quickly looking away when our eyes met. There were moments when I almost said something, to clear the air, to draw the line, but the truth was, I didn't want to. There was something about being seen, being noticed in a way I hadn't been in a long time. I told myself it was harmless. That it was just a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew we were both pretending not to notice how close we were standing. Because once attention turns into curiosity, and curiosity turns into comfort, it's only a matter of time before comfort turns into something you can't control. That's how secrets begin, not with a choice, but with hesitation. And that's where ours began. By the time spring came, the house didn't feel like home anymore. Every room carried echoes of moments I didn't want to remember. every silence felt louder than words ever could. My mom would talk about her day at work, laugh about small things, and I'd nod, pretending everything was normal. But inside, I was splitting in two, one part of me desperate to forget what had been building, the other haunted by it. My stepdad and I barely spoke now. After that morning when he made breakfast, something shifted. He started avoiding eye contact, staying later at work, leaving early in the mornings. Maybe guilt had finally caught up to him. Or maybe he sensed that mine had caught up to me. But tension doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It grows roots in your mind. It follows you even when you try to move on. One Saturday, I found him in the garage, fixing something under the hood of his car. I hesitated at the door, then forced myself to speak. "Do you want any help?" He looked up, startled for a moment, then gave a small smile. "No, I'm good. Just trying to stay busy." I nodded, unsure what to say next. We both stood there, surrounded by the sound of rain on the roof and the faint smell of engine oil. After a long pause, he said quietly, "I think we both crossed a line." My chest tightened. "We didn't do anything." He wiped his hands on a rag, looking down. "Sometimes not doing something doesn't make it right." Those words hit harder than I expected. Because he was right. We hadn't done anything, not really, but that didn't mean it was harmless. The looks, the unspoken tension, the silence that stretched too long, it all added up to something I didn't want to name. I left the garage without another word, but his voice stayed with me long after. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, the kitchen, the glances, the note, the silence. Every choice felt heavier in hindsight. By morning, I knew what I had to do. At breakfast, I told my mom I'd been thinking about moving out. She looked up, surprised. "Why? You've got everything here." I forced a smile. "I just need space. To figure myself out." She didn't question it much. Maybe she thought it was just part of growing up. Maybe she trusted both of us too much to imagine there was more to the story. When I packed my things later that week, my stepdad didn't say much. Just a quiet, "Take care of yourself." "I will," I said, trying not to look back. Leaving the house felt like taking a breath after being underwater too long. But even miles away, the memories followed. And for the first time, I understood that some secrets don't destroy you in a single moment, they erode you, piece by piece, until you finally decide to walk away. It's been years since that morning in the kitchen, but some memories refuse to fade. They linger quietly, like old stains, not enough to ruin what's left, but impossible to ignore. I've built a different life now. New city, new routines, a version of myself that most people would never guess once carried a secret like that. But every now and then, something small, the smell of coffee, the sound of rain, takes me right back to that kitchen. I've realized that what happened between me and my stepdad was never about attraction. It was about attention, about two people who, for very different reasons, needed to feel seen. My mom worked long hours, always exhausted. I was lost, trying to find where I fit. He was lonely in a way that had nothing to do with being unloved. We found comfort in silence, and mistook it for something deeper. That's the thing about emotional boundaries. You don't notice when you cross them. They blur slowly, quietly, until you're too far from where you started to recognize yourself. For a long time, I carried anger. Anger at him for knowing better. Anger at myself for not stopping it sooner. But with time, I learned that guilt, if you let it, can either bury you or build you. I chose the second. I've never told my mom. Not because I'm protecting him, but because I'm protecting her peace. There's no lesson she needs to learn from that chapter, and no healing that would come from reopening that wound. Every story has a turning point, and that was mine. It taught me that emotional temptation can be just as dangerous as physical betrayal. That you can lose parts of yourself without ever touching another person. And that sometimes, forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened, it's about releasing the hold it has on you. I haven't spoken to him in years. I heard he and Mom are still together, quieter than before, older now. Maybe they've both found their own kind of peace. As for me, I stopped running from who I was in that house, the confused, guilt-ridden version of myself. I had to face him. Understand him. Forgive him. Because healing doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from acknowledging the truth, and deciding not to repeat it. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: silence has power. But so does honesty. And the moment you choose honesty, with yourself, with others, that's when the real healing begins. So, if you're listening to this and you've ever been in a situation where you felt trapped between right and wrong, seen but misunderstood, just know, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to forgive yourself. Because no secret is worth your peace. This story is for mature audiences only. It contains emotional and sensitive themes meant for reflection, not recreation. Names, details, and timelines have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. Viewer discretion is advised. If this story moved you or made you think differently about silence, guilt, or love, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us bring more powerful, real-life confession stories to light every week. Remember, every story has a lesson, and every lesson has a voice. Headphone subscribe now. You never know which story might speak to you next.